The priest's voice was as cold as stone when he said those words. He didn't shout them, he didn't whisper them. He simply dropped them between us like heavy stones into a bottomless well. This man cannot marry again. There was no anger in that voice. It was worse. It was certainty. The kind of certainty only carried by those who know horrible things, things they have seen with their own eyes, things they can no longer keep silent about. My heart stopped right there. I didn't know it yet, but those words were only the beginning of finding out what was hiding behind the smile of the man I had promised to marry. My name is Eleanor. I am 82 years old now, and I still live here in this small town in Massachusetts, in the same house where I grew up, where my mother, Shirley, taught me to bake bread, and where my father, Howard, told me stories before bed. But this is not a story about bread or bedtime fairy tales. This is the story of how I discovered that the man I loved, the man I was about to marry, was hiding a secret so dark that when it finally came to light, it changed everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and the church itself. It was the summer of that distant year when I met Marcus. I was little more than a girl, full of dreams and that kind of naivete that only youth can give. He had already lived, already known pain, or at least that's what he said. He was a fabric merchant who came to our town every couple of weeks, tall, well-dressed, with that elegant way of speaking that made every girl in the neighborhood turn her head. But it was to me that he dedicated his attention. The first time I saw him, I was helping my mother, Shirley, at the farmer's market. She sold vegetables from our garden, and I was arranging the crates when I heard a voice behind me. "May I help you, miss?" I turned around and saw him. He had dark eyes, a gentle smile, and in his hands he carried a roll of blue fabric that shimmered in the sunlight. "It's for you," he said. "A gift, the color of your eyes." My father, Howard, was not immediately convinced. Men who give expensive gifts to girls they don't know usually want something in return, he told me one evening, smoking his pipe on the doorstep. But Marcus was patient. He came every week, bringing gifts for my parents too, talking to my father about business and politics, and helping my mother carry the heavy crates. Slowly, he won their trust, and he won my heart too. How could he not? He was attentive, thoughtful, and he made me laugh. He talked to me about his travels, about the cities he had visited, like Boston, where he was born and raised. He told me about his life, about his loneliness. "I was married once," he confessed to me after a few months, one evening while we were walking along the river. "My wife, Juliana, she died during childbirth, along with the baby. It was the darkest day of my life." Tears streamed down his face as he spoke. I hugged him, feeling his pain as if it were my own. "After her, I didn't want to love anyone again," he continued. "But then I met you, Eleanor. And I realized that maybe God was giving me a second chance." How could I not believe him? How could I not see in him a wounded man trying to heal? After 8 months of courtship, Marcus asked for my hand. My father accepted. My mother cried with joy. I was on cloud 9. I would become the wife of a respected merchant. I would have my own home, maybe children, everything a girl my age could dream of. But then came the day we went to St. Peter's Parish to arrange the wedding. I remember every detail of that day as if it were yesterday. It was a September afternoon. The sun filtered through the church's stained glass windows, making the mosaics on the floor sparkle. I wore my best dress, the white lace one my mother had sewn for me. Marcus was by my side, holding my hand, smiling. Pastor Elias welcomed us into his office. He was an older man with white hair and gnarled hands that trembled slightly as he invited us to sit. "So, children," he said in a gentle voice, "you wish to join in marriage before God." It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded, and I smiled shyly. The pastor opened a register, picked up his pen. I have to ask you a few questions. It's standard procedure, he explained. He asked for our full names, our dates of birth, and our parents' names. Everything proceeded normally. But when he got to Marcus and asked, "Is this your first marriage, son?" And Marcus replied, "No, Pastor. I am a widower. My wife died a few years ago." The expression on Pastor Elias's face changed. It was a subtle change, but I noticed it. His hands stopped on the register page. His eyes slowly lifted to Marcus, and in that gaze there was something that chilled my blood. It wasn't surprise. It was recognition. And something else. Something that looked like anger, or perhaps disgust. "What was your wife's name?" the pastor asked, his voice suddenly hard. Marcus answered without hesitation. "Juliana Moretti. She died in Boston." The pastor nodded slowly, then closed the register with an abrupt motion. "I need to check some documents," he said. "You two wait here. Marcus, come with me for a moment." I remember the silence that followed. Marcus looked at me, smiled, and squeezed my hand. "It's just bureaucracy, my love," he whispered to me. "I'll be right back." He followed the pastor out of the office. The door closed behind them. And I remained there, sitting on that hard wooden chair, looking at the walls covered with pictures of saints, feeling a growing weight in my chest, a dark premonition that I couldn't quite define. 10 minutes passed, then 20, then 30. I could hear voices from the other side of the door, but I couldn't make out the words. At first the voices were calm, then they grew louder. I heard Marcus say something in an angry tone. Then the pastor's voice, stronger, saying, "How could you? How could you? And now you come here asking me to bless another marriage." My heart was pounding so hard I thought my chest would burst. I stood up, moved closer to the door, and pressed my ear against the wood. "She knows nothing." It was Marcus's voice, desperate. "She has nothing to do with any of this." "And you think that's right?" The pastor's voice was full of contempt. "Do you think it's right to bring her into this family without her knowing who you really are? What you did?" What had he done? What were they talking about? My hands were trembling. I wanted to open that door. I wanted to walk in and demand an explanation, but something paralyzed me. Fear. The fear of discovering something I could never unlearn. Then the door flew open. Marcus walked out, his face pale, his eyes red. He tried to grab my arm with force, too much force. "Let's go," he said in a broken voice. "Now." "But the wedding," I stammered. "Let's go." He almost dragged me out of the office. But before we could reach the church door, Pastor Elias came out too. "Eleanor," he called. I turned around. The old pastor looked at me with an expression I will never forget. It was pity mixed with sorrow. "My daughter," he said slowly, weighing every word. "This man cannot marry again." Those words dropped like stones. "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice shaking. "It means exactly what I said. I cannot bless this marriage. I cannot allow it." Marcus turned furious. "You have no right," he shouted. "You don't know anything. I'm a widower. I have all the documents. I have my wife's death certificate." "Yes," the pastor said in a calm but inflexible voice. "Juliana is dead, but you know very well how she died, and you know very well why." The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at Marcus, searching his eyes for an explanation, for reassurance. But what I saw terrified me. It was guilt. It was fear. It was the face of a man exposed. "Marcus," I whispered, "what is he talking about?" He shook his head, taking my hand. "It's all a mistake, my love. The pastor is confused. He's old. He doesn't know what he's saying. Let's leave. I'll explain everything to you. I promise." But Pastor Elias wasn't finished. "If you marry her without telling her the truth," he said, fixing Marcus with icy eyes, "if you bring her into that house, into that family without her knowing, then the sin will fall upon you too for all eternity, and I will not put my name on it." Then he turned to me. "Daughter, come and see me, alone, when you are ready, when you have the courage to know the truth." Marcus dragged me out. We walked in silence to the town square. When I finally managed to break free from his grasp, I stopped. "Explain," I said. "Explain now." He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something different on his face. Something dark. "The pastor is crazy," he said. "He's always been against me ever since what happened to Juliana. He blames me for her death, but I didn't do anything wrong, Eleanor. You have to believe me." "Then why can't we get married?" "We can get married, just not here, not with him. We'll go to another church, in another town. There are plenty of priests, plenty of places to celebrate our love." But something inside me had broken. That certainty, that blind trust I had in him, it was beginning to crumble. "What happened to Juliana?" I asked. "You told me she died in childbirth." "Yes, she died in childbirth, that's the truth." "Then why does the pastor say you know how she died and why?" Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. His eyes avoided mine. It's complicated," he stammered. "You can't understand. It was a difficult time. There were problems." "What kind of problems?" He didn't answer. He looked at me for a long time, then said, "Give me time. Give me time to sort out my thoughts, to talk to the pastor, to clarify everything. I promise I will explain everything to you. But now, trust me. I love you, Eleanor. I love you more than my own life." I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to believe him. But that evening, when I returned home, I couldn't sleep. Pastor Elias's words kept echoing in my head. "This man cannot marry again. You know very well how she died, and you know very well why." What did it mean? What had Marcus done? And why, despite everything, was a part of me still afraid to find out? For 3 days, I didn't see Marcus. He sent messages through a boy from the market saying he had to go to Boston for business, that he would be back soon, and that he loved me. But I couldn't shake the doubt. I couldn't forget the expression on that pastor's face. I couldn't ignore the feeling that something terrible was about to emerge from the shadows. And so, on the 4th day, I made a decision that would change everything. I woke up at dawn, dressed in silence so as not to wake my mother, and left the house. The sun was just rising, painting the sky pink and gold. The streets were deserted. I walked to St. Peter's Church. The door was open, as always. I went inside. Pastor Elias was already awake, sitting on a pew near the altar, his hands clasped in prayer. When he saw me, he didn't seem surprised. It was as if he had been waiting for me. "Eleanor," he said gently, "I knew you would come." I sat down beside him, my hands trembling in my lap. "I need to know," I whispered. "I need to know the truth. Who is Marcus? What did he do?" The old pastor sighed deeply. He looked at me with those tired eyes full of ancient sorrow. "My daughter," he said slowly, "what I am about to tell you is a dark story. A story of sins that involve not only Marcus, but also the church itself. And once you know it, you can never go back. Are you sure you want to know?" I swallowed hard. My heart was racing, but I nodded. "Yes," I said, "I have to know." And so, Pastor Elias began to speak. And with every word that came out of his mouth, the world I knew began to collapse. His voice was low, almost a whisper, as if the very walls of the church could listen and judge. "Marcus Bellini," Pastor Elias began, "was indeed married to Juliana Moretti. That is true. They were married in Boston, at St. James Cathedral. It was a blessed marriage, full of hope, like all young marriages." He paused, his hands trembling slightly as he held them clasped. But what happened next? What happened is a sin that still burns my soul. I waited. The silence in the church was so profound that I could hear the pounding of my heart in my ears. Juliana was a sweet girl, the pastor continued. She came from a very strict, very traditional family, the kind of family where appearances are everything, where sin must be hidden at all costs. He swallowed hard. Juliana became pregnant before the wedding. His words hit me like a slap. In our world, in our society, that was an unforgivable scandal. A girl who became pregnant before marriage brought shame upon the entire family. But they got married, I said. They got married before the baby was born, didn't they? The pastor nodded slowly. Yes, they married quickly, but not quickly enough for Juliana's family. When the baby girl was born— The baby? I interrupted. My heart stopped. Marcus told me the baby died with Juliana during childbirth. Pastor Elias looked at me with those eyes full of ancient sadness. Marcus lied to you, my daughter. There was never a birth that killed Juliana, because Juliana was not pregnant when she died. I didn't understand. My mind struggled to put the pieces together. But then the baby girl, the pastor corrected me. Her name was Donna. She was born healthy, alive, and beautiful. I saw her with my own eyes when she was just a few days old. She had strong lungs, that little one. She cried with all the strength in her body. Then where— My voice broke. Where is she now? The silence that followed was terrible. Pastor Elias closed his eyes, as if what he was about to say caused him physical pain. Juliana's family, with Marcus's consent, entrusted the baby to a church institution, an orphanage in Boston. They said it was temporary, only until Marcus settled down financially, until he was able to provide for a family. But that's normal, isn't it? I said, desperately searching for an explanation that made sense. Many struggling families temporarily entrust their children to religious institutions. Yes, the pastor said bitterly. It is normal, or at least it should be. But what happened next? What the church did to that baby girl and to hundreds, thousands of other babies is not normal, my daughter. It was a deception, a manipulation of faith to hide the scandal. My hands were frozen. What did they do? Pastor Elias opened his eyes and looked me straight in the face. They took the baby and sent her away, far away from here, to America. They gave her up for adoption to an American family who knew nothing of her real mother, her real father, or her true identity. The world around me began to spin. But how could they? She was Marcus's daughter. She was his daughter. Marcus signed documents, the pastor said in a flat voice. Documents stating that he was unable to provide for the child. Documents in which he waived his rights as a father. And the church. The church had a program of rapid international adoptions. Children from family situations considered problematic or poor were chosen and sent overseas, promising the biological parents that the children would have a better future. But we who worked in that program, we know the truth. What truth? I whispered, even though a part of me didn't want to know it. That those children were separated from their families without fully informed consent, and that was illegal, Pastor Elias said, and his voice broke. The adoptive families paid high fees, but the biological parents were often misled into believing the separation was only temporary. It was a cruel lie to maintain the secret. Tears began to stream down my face. And Juliana? Did Juliana know? No, the pastor said. Not at first. She was told that Donna was in an orphanage in Boston, that she was fine and growing strong. But Juliana wanted to see her daughter. She kept asking, insisting, and when she finally went to the institution where she thought the baby was, they told her that Donna had been transferred. They wouldn't tell her where. And then what did she do? She searched, the pastor said in a broken voice. She searched for months. She went from church to church, from office to office. And in the end, she found someone who told her the truth. They told her that her daughter had been sent to America, that she would never see her again. He stopped, wiping a trembling hand across his face. And when Juliana discovered this, when she understood that her daughter had been stolen from her, ripped away forever, she collapsed. Collapsed? She fell into a deep depression, the pastor explained. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping. She cried day and night. Marcus tried to comfort her, or at least that's what they told me. He convinced her to marry him officially, promising her they would have other children. But Juliana didn't want other children. She wanted Donna. She wanted her daughter. The church seemed colder now, darker. The statues of the saints watched us from above with stone eyes that seemed accusatory. "And then?" I asked, although my voice was barely a thread. "And then Juliana died," Pastor Elias said. She died in their home in Boston. Officially, the cause of death was registered as post-delivery complications. But there had been no delivery. Juliana was not pregnant. Some said it was her heart. Others said it was a sudden illness. But He stopped, tears streaming down his wrinkled face. I spoke to the doctor who signed the death certificate. He was drunk, full of guilt. He confessed to me that the official cause was changed, that it was not merely heart failure, but a death brought on by overwhelming despair. Overwhelming despair. My blood ran cold. "You mean her heart was completely broken by that man?" "I mean her spirit was broken," the pastor corrected me. The doctor said the despair was so deep that Juliana lost the will to live, deliberately taking too much medication. Her family and Marcus convinced the doctor to change the cause of death. To avoid the scandal, because a self-inflicted death was considered a mortal sin, and Juliana could not have been buried in consecrated ground. I couldn't breathe. My head was spinning. And Marcus? Did Marcus know? Did he know his wife had taken her own life? "He knew," the pastor said harshly. Of course he knew. He was the one who found the body, but he chose to lie, he chose to falsify the truth. And then, after a few months, he left Boston. He began to travel for work. And he began looking for another woman, a woman who knew nothing of his past, a woman like you. I jumped up from the pew. My legs were trembling so hard I thought I would fall. "It's not possible," I stammered. "It's not possible. Marcus he can't have done such a thing. Abandon his daughter, allow his wife to destroy herself until—" "It is possible, my daughter," Pastor Elias said in a gentle but inflexible voice. "It is not only possible, it is what happened. And I cannot allow you to enter that marriage without knowing the truth. I cannot bless the union of a man who destroyed one family and now seeks to build another on the ruins of the first." I ran out of the church. The cool morning air hit my face, but I couldn't fill my lungs. I vomited in the corner of the churchyard, doubled over, my body shaken by violent sobs. People passing by looked at me with curiosity or pity, but I didn't care. Everything I had believed about Marcus, all the love I had felt for him, was crumbling like ash between my fingers. But a part of me, a small, stubborn part, refused to believe. Not without proof, not without confirmation. I had to know for sure. I had to see with my own eyes. And so, when my legs stopped shaking, when I could finally breathe again, I made another decision. A dangerous decision, perhaps a foolish one. I would go to Boston. I would find the truth on my own. I didn't tell my mother anything when I returned home. I just told her I didn't feel well, that I needed to rest. I locked myself in my room and began to plan. I had some savings, money I had put aside over the years working at the market with my mother. It wasn't much, but it would be enough for a train ticket and a few nights in a cheap boarding house. The next day, at dawn, I left a note for my mother. "I have to go away for a few days. Please don't worry. I'll be back soon. I love you. I grabbed a small bag with a few things, my rosary that my grandmother had given me, and left the house while the sky was still dark. I arrived at the train station just as the first train to Boston was about to depart. The journey lasted hours. I watched the landscape rush by outside the window without really seeing it. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, fears, and questions. What would I find in Boston? What would I say when I got there? What if Pastor Elias had lied? And what if he had told the truth? I arrived in Boston in the afternoon. The city was beautiful, full of art and history, but I had no eyes for beauty. I asked a policeman for directions to St. James Cathedral, the one where Marcus and Juliana had married. I walked through narrow, crowded streets, among tourists and Bostonians, until I reached the large square dominated by the basilica's facade. The church was magnificent, with its white and green marble, its elaborate decorations. I entered, my heart pounding. There was a service in progress. The choir's voices echoed beneath the high arches. I waited for it to finish, then approached a young priest who was extinguishing the candles on the altar. "Father," I called timidly, "may I ask you something?" He turned and smiled at me gently. "Of course, daughter. Tell me." "I am looking for information about a wedding that took place here some years ago, between Marcus Bellini and Juliana Moretti. Were you here at that time? Do you remember anything?" The young priest's smile faded. He looked at me with a strange expression, a mixture of surprise and discomfort. "Marcus Bellini," he repeated slowly. "Yes, I know that name. But I wasn't here when he married. If you want information about the marriage registers, you should speak with the rector. He's in the parish office." He pointed to a side door. I thanked him and headed towards the office. I knocked with a trembling hand. An elderly voice invited me in. The office was small, filled with shelves loaded with dusty books and registers. Behind a dark wooden desk sat an old priest with thick glasses who looked at me inquisitively. "Good evening, Father," I said. "My name is Eleanor. I come from Massachusetts. I am looking for information about Marcus Bellini and his wife, Juliana Moretti." At that name, the old priest stiffened. He took off his glasses, slowly cleaned them with a handkerchief, then looked me straight in the eyes. "Why are you looking for information about them?" he asked. Because Marcus asked me to marry him," I replied, my voice shaking. "And I discovered things about his past that I don't understand. I have to know the truth." The priest nodded slowly, then got up and went towards one of the shelves. He took down a thick register, opened it, and flipped through the pages with expert fingers. "Marcus Bellini and Juliana Moretti," he read aloud, "married in this church. Witnesses present. Valid marriage." Then he closed the register and handed it to me. "See for yourself." I took the register with trembling hands. I found the page. There it was, in black and white. The marriage, the signatures. Everything official, everything regular. And their daughter?" I asked hesitantly. "Donna, is she registered here?" The priest returned to the shelves, took another register, the one for baptisms. He opened it, searched, then nodded. "Donna Bellini, daughter of Marcus Bellini and Juliana Moretti, baptized in this church, godmother and godfather present." Is she still alive?" My voice was barely a whisper. "Where is she?" The priest closed the register with a sharp snap. "That I don't know, daughter, and even if I did, I couldn't tell you. Adoption records are confidential, but I can tell you one thing." He approached me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "If Marcus told you the child is dead, he lied to you. There is no death certificate for Donna Bellini, at least not in this parish." Tears blinded me. So it was true. Everything was true. The child was alive somewhere, far away, without knowing who her father was, who her mother was, and Marcus. Marcus had allowed it to happen. He had signed the documents, he had given her up, and then he had lied, telling me she was dead. And Juliana? I asked in a broken voice. What happened to her? The priest sighed deeply. Juliana Moretti Bellini died in her home. The official cause was registered as heart failure, but everyone in the parish knew. We knew it was a broken heart that killed her. Not one broken by physical pain, but one shattered by the loss of her child. I left that church with the truth burning inside me like a red-hot iron. I walked the streets of Boston aimlessly, tears streaming freely down my face. I didn't know what to do, where to go. All I knew was that I couldn't marry Marcus. I couldn't spend my life with a man capable of such a thing. But one question kept tormenting me, louder than all the others. Why? Why had Marcus done such a thing? Why had he abandoned his daughter? And above all, was he hiding other secrets? Was there something else I didn't know? Something even darker? I had to find out. I had to know the whole truth. And to do that, I had to do something brave, perhaps foolish. I had to return home and confront Marcus face to face. Not with tears and pleas, but with the truth I had uncovered. I wanted to see his eyes when I told him I knew. I wanted to hear his side from his own mouth. And only then would I decide what to do. The next day, I took the train back home. But when I arrived at the station, I found Marcus waiting for me. How had he known I had gone to Boston? Who had told him? His face was a mask of anger and fear. "Where have you been?" he demanded in a harsh voice. "Your mother has been worried sick." I looked him straight in the eyes, and for the first time I saw Marcus for who he truly was. Not the charming, gentle man I had fallen in love with, but a stranger with a dark past and terrible secrets. "I've been to Boston," I replied in a calm voice, calmer than I felt. "And I found out everything, Marcus, everything you hid from me." The color drained from his face. "Eleanor." "Donna," I interrupted him. "Your daughter." "She's alive, isn't she? She didn't die with Juliana. You abandoned her. You allowed the church to send her away." Marcus grabbed my arm, dragging me away from the station into a side alley out of curious sight. "Who told you these things?" he hissed. "The crazy pastor? You can't believe him. He was involved in that whole corrupt program. Now he's trying to shift the blame onto others." "I saw the registers," I said in a firm voice. "I spoke to the priests in Boston. I know the truth, Marcus." "I know what you did." He let go of me, stepping back. And then something changed on his face. The mask fell away completely. "You want the truth?" he said in a cold voice. "Fine. I'll tell you the truth. Yes, Donna is alive, or at least she was when she was sent to America. I don't know where she is now. I don't know who she has become. And you know what? I don't care." His words hit me like punches. "How can you say such a thing? She was your daughter." "She was a mistake," he shouted. "A mistake Juliana and I made when we were young and foolish. I wasn't ready to be a father. I didn't have money. I didn't have a proper home. What kind of life would that child have had with me?" The church offered me a solution. They told me Donna would go to a wealthy family in America. She would have everything I couldn't give her. So, yes, I signed the documents. And I don't regret it. "And Juliana?" I whispered. "What about your wife, who destroyed herself over the loss of her daughter?" "Juliana was weak," Marcus said scornfully. "She couldn't understand that what we had done was for the best. She wasted away in her sorrow, refusing to move on. I tried to help her. I tried to give her a new life, a new family. But she only wanted to cry over a child she would never see again. And in the end, she decided she didn't want to live anymore." "You let her die," I said, my voice full of horror. "You knew she was suffering, that she was destroying herself, and you did nothing." "What was I supposed to do?" he asked bitterly. Go to America to look for a child who already had a new family? Destroy the life Donna had to satisfy Juliana's selfish need? No. I chose to move on. And when Juliana was no longer able to do that, when she chose to end her suffering, I let her go. I looked at him, and in that moment, I understood. I understood that the man before me had no heart. He had no conscience. He had sacrificed his daughter for convenience. He had watched his wife die without doing anything. And now he was trying to build a new life with me, hiding all this beneath a facade of charm and promises. I will never marry you, I said in a firm voice. Not after what you did, not after who you are. Marcus laughed, but it was a bitter, joyless laugh. Oh, really? And what will you do? Will you go around telling everyone this story? Who will believe you? I have documents proving Juliana died of natural causes. I have witnesses who will say I was a devoted husband. All you have are the words of bitter priests trying to alleviate their own guilt. I have the truth, I replied, and that is enough. I turned to leave, but Marcus stopped me once more. If you leave me, he said in a threatening voice, I will make sure you and your family pay the consequences. I will ruin your father's reputation. I will make sure no one buys anything from your family at the market anymore. I will destroy you, Eleanor, just like I destroyed everything else. But I was no longer afraid. Not of him. Not after what I had uncovered. Do what you have to do, Marcus, I said. But I will not be complicit in your crimes. I will not be the next Juliana. And I walked away, leaving him alone in that alley, with his secrets and his remorse. I didn't know yet that this was only the surface, that there was still so much more to uncover, so much horror still hidden in the shadows, and that the complete truth would demand a price I never imagined I would have to pay. My mother was waiting for me at the front door. Her face was etched with worry, her eyes red from crying. When she saw me, she ran towards me and hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. Eleanor, where have you been? Why did you disappear like that? I didn't answer right away. How could I explain everything I had discovered? How could I tell her that the man she had welcomed into our family, the man she had blessed, was a monster? We went inside. My father, Howard, was sitting at the kitchen table, his pipe unlit in his hands. He looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It wasn't anger. It was something deeper. It was disappointment. Marcus came here, he said in a grave voice. He told us you ran away, that you went to Boston looking for trouble. He told us you're confused, that someone filled your head with lies. They're not lies, Daddy, I said, my voice shaking. Everything I found out is true. Marcus abandoned his daughter. He watched his wife die, and the church is complicit in all of this. My mother sank into a chair. What are you talking about? She whispered. What daughter? Marcus told us the baby died with the mother. And so, I told them everything. Every word Pastor Elias had told me, every document I had seen in Boston, every admission Marcus had made in the alley. As I spoke, I saw the horror grow on their faces. My mother brought a hand to her mouth, her eyes wide. My father gripped his pipe so tightly that his knuckles were white. When I finished, the silence in the kitchen was as heavy as lead. Then my father spoke. If all this is true, he said slowly, then that man will never set foot in this house again, and you, my daughter, did well to leave him. I felt tears stream down my face. But Daddy, he threatened our family. He said he would ruin our name, that no one would buy from us at the market anymore. My father stood up, came towards me, and took my face in his rough hands. Let him try, he said in a firm voice. I prefer to die poor, but with a clear conscience, than rich but complicit in evil. You did the right thing, Eleanor, and we will always stand by you. Those words gave me strength, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to have left Marcus. It wasn't enough to know the truth. I had to do something. I had to ensure that what had happened to Juliana and Donna did not remain buried in silence. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed awake, staring at my bedroom ceiling, thinking about Donna. Where was she now? In which American city? With which family? Did she know she had been adopted? Did she know that somewhere in Massachusetts there was a mother who had died from the pain of losing her? And how many other Donnas were there? How many other children had been snatched from their families and sent to the other side of the world? At dawn, I made another decision. I went back to St. Peter's Church. Pastor Elias was already there, as always, kneeling before the altar. When he heard my footsteps, he turned. "I knew you would return," he said in a tired voice. "Did you find what you were looking for in Boston?" "Yes," I replied. And I confronted Marcus. He confessed everything. "But Pastor, this is not enough. I need to know more. I need to know everything about the program that destroyed that family." The old pastor stood up slowly, his knees creaking. "Come with me," he said. I followed him through the church, down a narrow corridor, to a small room that served as an archive. The walls were covered with shelves full of dusty boxes and antique registers. Pastor Elias lit an oil lamp, then began to search through the shelves. "What I am about to show you," he said as he searched, "should not exist. I should have destroyed it years ago when the program ended. But I couldn't. These documents are the proof of what the church did. They are the testimony of the pain of hundreds of families." He found a wooden box, pulled it down from the shelf, and opened it. Inside were stacks of letters, documents, and faded photographs. "I worked in that program for years," the pastor confessed, his voice full of shame. "I was young. I thought we were doing the right thing. We were told those children were going to better families, that they would have opportunities they would never have here. But over time, I began to see the truth, to hear the stories of mothers who came looking for their children and found they had disappeared, to read the desperate letters of women begging to have their babies back." He took a stack of letters from the box and handed them to me. "Read," he said. I took them with trembling hands. The first letter was written in shaky handwriting, the ink blurred as if tears had fallen upon it. "Please, bring me back my son. You told me it was only temporary. You promised me. I have no more money, but I will work. I will do anything. Bring me back Stephen." The second letter was similar, and the third, and the fourth. Dozens, perhaps hundreds of letters, all from desperate mothers, all asking for their children, all unanswered. "What did the church answer?" I asked in a broken voice. "Nothing," the pastor said. Or worse, they replied saying the children were fine, that they were happy in their new families, and that it was better not to disturb them. But it was a lie. Most of these women never saw their children again. I continued reading, and then I found something that chilled my blood. A letter signed by Juliana Moretti. The date was written at the top, just a few months before her death. "Please, bring me back my daughter. If I cannot see her again, I will shorten my life. I cannot continue to live knowing that Donna is somewhere far away, thinking she was abandoned. Please, I beg you." Tears blinded me. "They received this letter," I whispered. "They knew Juliana was thinking of taking her own life, and they did nothing." "Exactly," Pastor Elias said bitterly. "They did nothing, because to them, these mothers didn't matter. Only the money they received from the American families mattered. Only the program that had to continue." "But who organized all this?" I asked. "Who made these decisions?" The pastor returned to the box, picking up another document. It was a list of names: priests, officials, church functionaries. "These were the ones responsible for the program," he said. "Coordinators, administrators, intermediaries. They worked with American agencies looking for children to adopt. American families paid high fees, officially, to cover travel and documentation expenses. But the money was much more than was needed for those expenses. I scanned the list. Most of the names I didn't recognize, but then I saw one that made me stop. Bishop Davies, I read aloud. Was he one of the coordinators? Yes, the pastor said. He was the principal coordinator for Massachusetts and Connecticut. He processed all the applications through his office in Boston. He signed the documents, authorized the departures, and he stopped, hesitating. He was friends with Marcus. The world around me seemed to stop. What did you say? Marcus and Bishop Davies knew each other, the pastor repeated. Not just because Marcus had entrusted Donna to the program, but because Marcus helped the bishop. He found other families, other girls in trouble, other single mothers. He convinced them to entrust their babies to the institution. He told them the same things he had been told, that it was temporary, that it was for the child's good, that they could take them back when they were ready. I felt nausea rise in my throat. Marcus recruited for the program? Not officially, the pastor said, but yes, he traveled for work. He knew many people. He heard stories of girls in trouble, and when he found someone in a difficult situation, he referred them to the program. In exchange, he received compensation. Not direct money, but favors. Discounts on his business dealings with Catholic suppliers, recommendations, contacts. I couldn't breathe. Everything was worse than I had imagined. Marcus wasn't just a cowardly father who had abandoned his daughter. He was an active accomplice in a system that destroyed families. How many children, I asked in a trembling voice, how many children were sent away through this program? Pastor Elias looked at the box full of documents. Hundreds in our region alone, he said, perhaps thousands across the country, and not all from poor families. Some were girls from good families who had committed the scandal of becoming pregnant before marriage. Their parents sent them to church institutions, away from the eyes of the world. The girls gave birth there, and then the babies disappeared. The girls were told it was for the best, that the child would be raised by a respectable family. Many of them never knew where their children ended up. And Marcus knew all this? He knew, the pastor confirmed, and he didn't care. To him, it was just a way of doing business, of gaining favors. He didn't see those babies as people. He saw them as opportunities. I leaned against the wall, my legs no longer supporting me. I have to stop him, I said. I have to make sure he can never do such a thing again. It's already over, Pastor Elias said. The program stopped years ago. Too many scandals, too many questions. The church officially decided to close it, but the children who were sent away, they are still out there, without knowing the truth, and the mothers who search for them, many of them will never find them. But Donna, I said desperately, is there a way to find her? To tell her the truth about her mother? The pastor shook his head sadly. Adoption records are confidential. The American families don't even know the real names of the children they adopted. Most of them are given a new identity, a new birth certificate. It's as if their previous life never existed. It can't be, I whispered. It can't end like this. Juliana died believing her daughter had forgotten her, that she grew up thinking she'd been abandoned. And Donna will grow up never knowing the truth, never knowing that her mother loved her so much that I couldn't finish. Sobs choked me. Pastor Elias placed a hand on my shoulder. There is one thing you can do, he said slowly. Not for Donna, unfortunately, but for all the other families who are still suffering. You can make this story public. You can make sure people know what happened. Maybe we can't bring those children back, but we can at least give voice to the pain of their mothers. How? I asked. Who will listen to me? I'm just a girl from a small town. Who will believe my story against the word of the church? You are not alone, the pastor said. There are other women searching for their children, other families who want the truth. If you can find them, if you can unite your voices, maybe someone will listen. That evening, I returned home with the box of documents Pastor Elias had given me. My father helped me hide it under the floorboards of my room, lifting the wooden planks and creating a secret stash. "If Marcus finds out you have these documents," he said in a grave voice, "it could be dangerous, not just for you, but for the whole family." "I know, Daddy," I replied, "but I have to do this. I have to make sure Juliana didn't die in vain." I began reading all the documents, one at a time. It took weeks. Every evening, after dinner, I would lock myself in my room and read the desperate letters of mothers searching for their children. I read the official reports that coldly described the placements of children with American families. I read the correspondence between priests and adoption agency officials, where they discussed numbers, quotas, and payments. And as I read, I began taking notes. I wrote down the names of the mothers who had written letters. I wrote down the names of the children who had been sent away. I wrote down the dates, the locations. I was creating a list, a map of sorrow that stretched across Massachusetts and Connecticut. Then I started looking for those mothers. I went to the towns and cities listed in the documents. I asked around, discreetly, "Do you know a woman who lost a child years ago? A woman who was looking for a child who had been entrusted to the church?" At first, people looked at me with suspicion. But when I explained who I was, what I was doing, some began to talk. "Yes," said an old woman at a market near Springfield. "I know a woman like that. My cousin. She lost her daughter when she was young. They told her it was for the best. She never recovered. She gave me an address. I went to visit that woman. She was elderly now, her hair gray, her face marked by pain. When I told her why I was there, she burst into tears. My daughter's name was Carla, she told me in a broken voice. She was only a few days old when they took her. They told me they would take her to a safe place, that they would care for her. They promised I could see her again when I was ready. But when I returned a few months later, they told me she had been adopted, that she was in America. They didn't even give me a name, an address, nothing. It's as if she died, but worse, because somewhere out there she is alive and she thinks I abandoned her. I listened to her story, recording it in my notes. I promised her I would do everything possible to make the truth known. And then I went to find another mother, and yet another. Each story was different in its details, but all shared the same core of pain. Children snatched away, promises betrayed, lives destroyed. And as I collected these stories, I began to understand how vast the crime was. It wasn't just hundreds of children. It was thousands. And behind every number was a broken mother, a child growing up without knowing their roots, a family destroyed by sorrow. But there was something I still didn't understand, something that didn't add up. Marcus had helped the program for years, recruiting families, facilitating adoptions. But why? The commercial favors he received didn't seem enough to justify such deep complicity. There had to be something else, something darker. And it was when I spoke with one of the women, an elderly lady who had lost 2 children in the program, that I discovered the last, terrible piece of the puzzle. "I know the man you're talking about," she told me when I mentioned Marcus. "I remember him. He often came to the institution where I worked as a cook. He was always there, talking to the priests, looking at the children. I thought it was strange, a man without family spending so much time in an orphanage." "Why was he there?" I asked. "What was he doing?" The woman hesitated, then said, "He was choosing." "What?" "He was selecting the children, the ones who looked the healthiest, the prettiest, the ones the wealthy American families would request. He helped choose them, and then he received a commission. For every child who went through his contacts, for every family he had helped secure for the program through his business trips, he received a substantial financial benefit. The world collapsed beneath my feet. It wasn't just favors. It wasn't just commercial discounts. Marcus was receiving favors and discounts on his business to facilitate adoptions. Children like his own daughter. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Are you absolutely sure?" "How could I forget?" the woman said bitterly. "I once heard him boasting to a priest. He said it was a great way to network. He said there was always a demand for adoptions and that it was a shame not everyone understood how advantageous it was for his status." I ran out of that house. I vomited in the yard, doubled over, my body shaken by violent retching. Marcus wasn't just a father who had abandoned his daughter. He was a cynical facilitator who profited from the program for his own gain. And one of those children was his own daughter. I returned home that evening, knowing I had to do something drastic. It was no longer enough to collect stories. It was no longer enough to document the pain. I had to publicly denounce Marcus. I had to make sure everyone knew what he had done. But I also knew it was dangerous. Marcus had contacts. He had powerful friends in the church. If I publicly accused him without solid proof, he could destroy me. I needed something undeniable. I needed documents that directly linked Marcus to the payments. And I knew where to find them. In Bishop Davies's office in Boston. That was where all the program's financial documents were managed. That was where the proof I needed was. But how could I access it? How could I break into a bishop's office and steal documents without being caught? The answer came from an unexpected source. A young woman I had met during my research, a girl who worked as a secretary at the Boston Curia. "I can help you," she told me when I explained what I was looking for. "I know Bishop Davies's office. I know where he keeps the documents. But you have to understand, if we get caught, I will lose my job. Maybe worse." "Why do you want to help me?" I asked. She lowered her eyes. "Because I also lost a sister to that program. My mother was young, unmarried. The family forced her to entrust the baby. My sister was only a year old when they took her. I never knew her. But every day I wonder where she is, if she is happy, if she knows that somewhere there is a family that always loved her." And so, we made a plan. A risky plan, perhaps foolish. But it was the only chance I had to get the proof I needed. The proof that would nail Marcus and everyone like him. The proof that would give voice to all the mothers who still mourned their lost children. I didn't know yet that that plan would bring me face to face with a danger much greater than I had imagined, and that the complete truth about Marcus was even darker than everything I had uncovered so far. The girl's name was Martha, and she had a courage I could only admire. We met 3 days later in a small cafe near the Boston station, away from the curious eyes of the Curia. She had brought with her a map of the building where Bishop Davies's office was located. "He works here," she said, pointing to a room on the second floor. "He keeps all the most sensitive documents in a locked cabinet, but I know where he hides the key." We studied the plan in minute detail. Martha had access to the building even in the evening when most offices were empty. The bishop had a habit of leaving the Curia early on Friday evenings to go to his country house. That would be our moment. We would have perhaps an hour, maybe 2, before a nightly priest made his inspection rounds. "Are you sure you want to do this?" I asked her, looking into her eyes. "If we get caught?" "If we get caught," she interrupted me in a firm voice, "at least I will have tried to do something for my sister. For all the lost sisters and brothers. I can no longer live knowing the truth and doing nothing." I nodded. I understood that feeling perfectly. It was the same one that burned inside me every day. Friday arrived too slowly and too quickly at the same time. I took the train to Boston in the afternoon, my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. I carried a large empty bag with me for the documents we hoped to find. And I also carried a silent prayer, asking God for forgiveness for what I was about to do. Stealing was a sin, But letting those crimes remain hidden seemed like an even greater sin to me. I met Martha near the Curia as the sun was setting. The streets were emptying. People were heading home for dinner. "He left an hour ago," Martha whispered to me. "I saw Bishop Davies get into his car. The other priests are almost all in their rooms for evening prayer. This is our moment." I took a deep breath, trying to calm the tremors shaking my body. "Let's go." We entered through the side entrance, the one reserved for staff. Martha used her key. The door opened silently. The inner corridor was quiet, lit only by a few oil lamps hanging on the walls. Our footsteps echoed on the marble floor as we climbed the stairs to the second floor. Every shadow seemed to hide a danger. Every sound made me jump. Bishop Davies's office was at the end of the corridor. The solid wooden door had a golden plaque with his name engraved on it. Martha looked right and left, then pulled a set of keys from her pocket. "I took them from the administrative office," she whispered. "I need to return them tomorrow morning before anyone notices they're missing." She tried several keys until one turned in the lock. The door opened with a slight creak. The office was large and richly furnished. Dark wooden shelves covered the walls, filled with leather-bound books. A massive desk dominated the center of the room, and behind it, against the wall, was a tall cabinet with closed doors. "That's it," Martha said, pointing to it. "He keeps all the confidential documents there." She approached the desk, opened a drawer, and searched under a pile of papers. "It should be here." My heart was pounding so hard I thought my chest would burst. I looked nervously towards the door, expecting someone to walk in and discover us at any second. "Martha," I whispered urgently, "hurry! Here it is." She pulled out a small brass key. She rushed to the cabinet, inserting it into the lock. The doors opened, revealing rows and rows of folders and boxes. "Where do we start?" I asked, overwhelmed by the quantity of documents. "Look for anything that mentions the adoption program," Martha said, already pulling out folders and opening them quickly. "Look for names, transactions, correspondence with the American agencies." I started searching frantically. My eyes scanned the pages so fast I could barely read. But then I found something. A folder labeled International Placements, Financial Registers. I opened it with trembling hands. And there it was. Pages and pages of transactions, names of children, departure dates, destinations in America. And next to each name, an amount. Some were small, others much larger. "Martha, look!" I called to her. She came next to me, looking at the pages. Her face went pale. "My God," she whispered. "These are the payments. This is the money the American families paid for the children." But that wasn't all. Turning the pages, I found another section. Intermediaries and compensation. And there, in black and white, was the name of Marcus Bellini. Next to his name, a list of dates and amounts. Money he had received for every family he had helped find a child. My blood ran cold. It was true. Everything the woman had told me was true. Marcus was financially profiting from the separation of these children from their mothers. "We have to take all this," I said in a trembling voice. "Every page, every document that proves what they did." Martha nodded. We started pulling out all the folders that seemed relevant, piling everything onto the desk. There was so much documentation that my bag would never be enough. "Wait," Martha said. "There's a leather satchel in the administrative closet. I can go get it." As Martha left the room, I continued searching. And that's when I found something that chilled my blood. A separate folder, hidden deep in the cabinet, behind other files. I pulled it out. On top, it only read, "Special Cases, Restricted." I opened it, and what I saw took my breath away. They were photographs. Photographs of children, but not normal photographs. They were professional photographs, like the ones taken in photo studios. Each child was dressed in elegant clothes, posed carefully, and beneath each photograph was a name, an age, and a detailed description. Blonde hair, blue eyes, excellent health. Brown hair, brown eyes, intelligent and docile. They were catalogs of children. My hands trembled so hard I almost dropped the folder. Those children had been photographed and described like merchandise, like objects to be sold to the highest bidder. And at the bottom of the folder, I found letters. Letters from American families requesting children with specific characteristics. We are looking for a young girl, preferably with light hair, to complete our family. I felt sick. I had to lean against the desk to keep from falling. This wasn't just a poorly managed adoption program. This was a corrupt system of trading promises and children for profit. This was the exploitation of faith and desperation in its purest, most disgusting form. And the church was complicit, and Marcus was one of the main facilitators. Martha returned with a large leather satchel. I found... Eleanor, are you all right? You're pale as a ghost. I found the definitive proof, I could only manage to say, pointing to the open folders on the desk. Martha came next to me, looking at the registers. Her face grew serious. My God, she whispered. All these names, these dates, it's all true. It's true, I said in a broken voice. It's all true. We have to take everything. The world needs to know the extent of this deception. We started putting everything into the leather satchel. The financial registers, the mother's letters, the correspondence with the American agencies, the documents about adoptions, and the compensation paid to Marcus and other facilitators. It was so much material that the satchel barely closed. We have to go, Martha said nervously. We've been here too long. But just as we were about to close the cabinet, I heard footsteps in the corridor. Heavy, slow. Someone was walking towards the office. Martha looked at me with terrified eyes. The lamp, she whispered. I ran to blow out the oil lamp on the desk, plunging us into darkness. The steps got closer. Then they stopped right in front of the door. I heard the doorknob turn. My heart stopped. I desperately searched for a place to hide, but it was too late. The door opened. The light of a candle illuminated the room. And in the doorway was an elderly priest wearing a black cassock and an expression of growing shock on his face. Who are you? He demanded loudly. What are you doing in the bishop's office? Martha grabbed my hand. There was no escape. We had been discovered. Father, I work here, Martha said in a trembling voice. I'm Martha, the secretary. I know who you are, the priest interrupted her. And I know you have no reason to be here at this hour. And this woman? He pointed at me with an accusing finger. Who is she? A thief? What have you stolen? His eyes fell on the leather satchel I was clutching to my chest. Give me that satchel, he ordered. Immediately. No, I said, surprised by the firmness of my voice. I can't. What? The priest approached, anger growing on his face. How dare you refuse? I am a priest. You must obey me. You are a priest, I replied, my voice shaking but remaining firm. But what is in this satchel proves that you and your colleagues have betrayed everything a priest should represent. You facilitated the permanent separation of children for profit. You destroyed families. You lied to desperate mothers. And I will not let you hide these crimes. The priest stared at me with wide eyes. For a moment, I saw something in his gaze. It wasn't anger. It was fear. You don't know what you're talking about, he said, but his voice had lost its confidence. Those documents are church property. They are confidential. If you take them, it will be theft. You will go to prison. Then I'll go to prison, I said. But first, the world will know the truth. I took a step towards the door. The priest blocked my way, cutting off my passage. I won't let you leave, he said. I will call the authorities. I will have you arrested. But Martha moved quickly. She stood in front of the priest, blocking him. "Let us pass," she said, in a voice that brooked no argument. "These documents are leaving here, Father. You cannot stop the truth, and if you block us, we will make it public that you were here protecting these crimes." The priest looked at us, then looked at the satchel. He saw the determination in our eyes. And something in him broke. He stepped aside. "Go," he said in a tired voice. "Go before I change my mind." We didn't wait for a second invitation. We ran out of the office, down the corridor, and down the stairs. I could hear the priest shouting behind us, calling for help, but we didn't stop. We rushed out the side entrance and ran into the streets of Boston, running as if the devil himself were chasing us. We didn't stop until we were far away, hidden in a dark alley far from the Curia. We leaned against the wall, panting, our hearts pounding. "We did it," Martha whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I can't believe we did it." I looked at the satchel I was still clutching to my chest. Inside was the proof, undeniable proof of the church's and Marcus's crimes. But I knew this was only the beginning. "Martha," I said when I could finally catch my breath, "you have to go home. You have to pretend you know nothing. If they connect you to this, you will lose everything." "And you?" she asked. "What will you do?" "I'll go back home," I replied. "And then I'll make sure this story is told. Somehow, no matter what it costs me." We hugged, two women united by shared sorrow and desperate courage. Then Martha disappeared into the night, returning to a life she had just risked for the memory of a sister she had never known. And I remained there, alone, with a satchel full of terrible secrets and the determination not to let them remain hidden. I found a small boarding house to spend the night. I didn't sleep. I spent the hours reading and rereading the documents, making sure I understood every detail. And as I read, a plan began to form in my mind. A dangerous plan, perhaps impossible, but it was the only chance I had. The next morning, I took the first train back. When I arrived, instead of going home, I went straight to the local printing shop. The owner, Mr. Jenkins, was a man I had known for years. His son had played with me as a child. "Eleanor," Mr. Jenkins greeted me with surprise. "What brings you here?" "I need your help," I said. "I have documents that need to be copied, many documents, and then I need you to print them." "Print them?" He seemed confused. "What do you mean?" "I want to make a pamphlet," I explained. "A booklet that tells a story, a true story, a story that people need to know." Mr. Jenkins looked me in the eyes, and something he saw must have convinced him. "All right," he said slowly. "Show me what you have." I spent the following days working with Mr. Jenkins. We wrote the complete story, the story of Juliana and Donna, the story of the church's program, the story of Marcus and his role in the illicit adoption scheme. And we included copies of the most important documents, the financial registers with Marcus's name, the desperate letters from the mothers, the photographs of the children involved in the program. "This is a powerful story, Mr. Jenkins said when we finished composing the text. "But it is also dangerous. If you publish it, you will make many enemies, powerful enemies." "I know," I replied, "but if I don't publish it, all those children and all those mothers will remain forgotten, and men like Marcus will continue to live their lives as if nothing happened." We printed 500 copies of the pamphlet, 500 booklets that told the truth, and then I started distributing them. I put them in churches, in markets, and I left them on benches in town squares. I mailed them to newspapers, to politicians, to other dioceses. I wanted everyone to know. I wanted there to be no corner of the state where this story was not known. The reaction was immediate and violent. The local bishop issued a statement denouncing the pamphlet as defamatory lies against the Holy Church. Marcus filed a lawsuit for defamation, claiming everything was false. But he couldn't deny the documents. The documents with his signature, with the proof of the payments he had received. And as the storm grew around me, other voices began to join mine. Other mothers who had lost their children began to come forward, telling their stories. Other priests, those who had felt remorse for their role in the program, began to confess. Journalists began to investigate, uncovering even more evidence. Marcus was arrested. Not for the adoption program, that had been officially legal at the time, but for fraud and falsification of documents. Bishop Davies was removed from his post. Other priests involved in the program were transferred or forced to leave the church. It wasn't complete justice. It wasn't even close to what those families deserved. But it was a start. And while all this was happening, I kept thinking about Donna. Somewhere in America, there was a woman who had grown up without knowing the truth about her family. A woman who perhaps wondered why she was given up for adoption, whether her biological parents had loved her. And I had promised myself that one day, somehow, I would find a way to tell her the truth. To tell her that her mother had fought for her until her last breath, that she had been loved more than she could ever imagine. But first, I had to face one last battle. A battle that would require all the courage I had left. Because Marcus, even in prison, wasn't finished. He had sent me a message through his lawyer, a message that read, "If you continue, I will destroy you. I know your secrets. I know what you did, and I will use it against you." I didn't know what secrets he was talking about. I hadn't done anything wrong, but the threat was clear, and I knew Marcus was capable of anything. I knew this war wasn't over yet, and that the final price could be higher than I had ever imagined. The threat from Marcus haunted me for days. What secret could he possibly have about me? I mentally reviewed every moment of my life, every action, every decision. I hadn't done anything to be ashamed of, yet fear gnawed at me because I knew Marcus. I knew his ability to manipulate, to twist the truth, to create lies so convincing they seemed real. The answer came a week later, when I received a visit from two men. They introduced themselves as private investigators hired by Marcus's lawyer. "Miss Eleanor," one of them said with a cold smile, "we have some questions for you regarding how you obtained certain documents. Documents that were private property of the church. Documents that you stole from Bishop Davies's office." My blood ran cold. So this was it. Marcus wanted to accuse me of theft. He wanted to use the fact that I had taken those documents to discredit me, to make the whole story seem like my invention, a personal vendetta against a man who had rejected me. "I didn't steal anything," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Those documents prove terrible crimes. I had the moral right to take them." "Moral right is not a legal right," the other investigator said. "You violated private property. You stole confidential material. And Mr. Bellini is ready to testify that you did all this because you were obsessed with him, because you couldn't accept that he had ended your engagement." "He didn't end anything," I cried. "I left him when I found out the truth about what he had done." The investigators exchanged a glance. "So you admit to being romantically involved with Mr. Bellini?" "Yes, we were engaged. But, and do you admit to taking the documents from the bishop's office?" "I took the evidence of his crimes." "Answer the question, miss. Did you take the documents? Yes or no?" I realized the trap I was falling into. If I admitted taking the documents, Marcus could accuse me of theft. If I denied it, I looked like a liar. There was no way to win. "Get out," I said in a trembling voice. "Get out of my house." The investigators smiled. "As you wish, but we'll see you soon, in court." When they left, I collapsed into a chair, shaking violently. My mother, Shirley, who had listened to everything from the next room, came to hug me. "They can't do anything to you," she said, but her voice wasn't convincing. "You did the right thing." "I stole, Mama," I whispered. "I broke into an office and took documents that didn't belong to me. Technically, I committed a crime." "You exposed much bigger crimes," my mother said firmly. "Don't let them make you feel guilty about that." But the guilt was already consuming me. Not for taking the documents, I didn't regret that, but for putting Martha at risk. If the investigators found out she had helped me, she would lose her job, maybe worse. I had to protect her at all costs. The following days were the hardest of my life. Marcus's lawyer filed a formal complaint against me for theft and defamation. The newspapers, which had previously supported my story, now began publishing articles questioning my credibility. Rejects Girl Invents, Scandal for Revenge, one headline read. Theft in the name of justice, asked another. The pressure was unbearable. People on the street looked at me with suspicion. Some avoided me completely, as if I were a criminal. Others whispered when I passed. I felt the weight of judging eyes every time I left the house. And fear grew inside me like a tumor. Fear of going to prison. Fear of losing everything. Fear of having fought in vain. But then, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived by mail. It came from Washington, D.C., from the Department of Justice. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a brief but powerful message. Dear Miss Eleanor, we have received a copy of the documents you made public. We have launched an official investigation into the adoption program run by the church in past years. Your testimony will be crucial. Do not worry about the theft accusations. In cases of exceptional public interest, the law protects those who expose serious crimes. The department will support you. I cried reading those words. I cried with relief, with the hope that was suddenly reborn. I was not alone. I was not a criminal. I was a witness. And the government was finally taking seriously what I had revealed. The following weeks were a whirlwind of interrogations, depositions, and meetings with government lawyers and investigators. I told my story countless times. I showed the documents, explained how I had obtained them, and named the other mothers who had lost their children. And slowly, like a collapsing house of cards, the empire of lies that Marcus had built began to disintegrate. Other intermediaries were identified and arrested. More priests were removed from their posts. The American agencies that had collaborated with the program were investigated. And Marcus was convicted. Not just for fraud, but for the exploitation of families through the illicit adoption scheme, falsification of documents, and criminal conspiracy. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison. On the day of the sentencing, I was in court. I wanted to look him in the eyes when the judge pronounced the verdict. I wanted him to know that he hadn't succeeded in destroying me. When the guards led him away in handcuffs, he turned towards me. And in that moment, I saw something in his gaze that I had never seen before. It wasn't anger. It wasn't hatred. It was emptiness. It was as if he finally realized what he had done, all the lives he had destroyed, and no longer knew how to live with that burden. But justice in the courtroom didn't heal the pain of the mothers who had lost their children. It didn't bring back Donna or the other children who had been sent away. The victory had a bitter taste. Yes, Marcus had been punished. Yes, the program had been exposed. But the children were still out there, grown up as Americans, Canadians, without knowing their true story. In the months that followed, I dedicated myself completely to helping the separated families reunite. I worked with organizations seeking to track down the adopted children, now adults, to reconnect them with their biological families. It was difficult work, often unsuccessful. Many documents had been destroyed. Many identities had been erased. But every now and then, we managed to reunite a mother with a child. And in those moments, all the pain, all the struggle seemed worth it. The years passed. Marcus died in prison, alone and forgotten, many years before old age reached him. A sudden illness took him away, and no one mourned him. Bishop Davies was defrocked, his property confiscated, and his reputation destroyed. He lived his last years in poverty and shame. The consequences of their actions reached them long before they grew old, just as it should be. And I continued to live. I never married. After Marcus, after seeing what men could do in the name of power and money, I could never fully trust again. But I didn't feel alone. I had a mission, a purpose. I had the mothers I helped, the stories I collected, the memory of Juliana that I honored every day. I became a social worker, dedicating my life to reuniting separated families. And with every reunion I facilitated, I felt I was repaying a debt. A debt to Juliana, to Donna, to all the mothers and children who had suffered in silence for too long. It wasn't an easy life. There were days when the pain of all those stories crushed me, days when I wondered if it really made a difference. But then a letter would arrive, or a phone call. We found her. We found my daughter after 50 years. And everything would start to make sense again. And then, a few months ago, something happened that I never dared to hope for. I received a call from an American organization that helps adopted adults search for their origins. "Miss Eleanor," the voice said from across the ocean, "we are helping a woman who was adopted from Massachusetts as a child. She saw your name in the documents you made public decades ago. She says her biological mother's name was Juliana Moretti. She says her father was Marcus Bellini. Her birth name was Donna." The phone almost fell out of my hands. Donna. After all these years, Donna was looking for me. Is she still alive?" I asked in a trembling voice. "Yes, she's 70 years old. She lives in California. She has a family, grandchildren. She has had a good life. But all her life, she felt that something was missing. She always knew she was adopted, but only recently decided to search for the truth about her origins. Does she want to speak with me?" "Yes, she wants to know everything. She wants to know her mother's story. She wants to know why she was given up for adoption. And when she read your story, when she discovered what her mother Juliana went through, she cried for days. But now she wants the complete truth. Do you think you can help her?" "Yes," I replied without hesitation. "Yes, I will tell her everything." And so, a few weeks later, Donna came home. I met her in the same church where everything had begun, St. Peter's Church. She was an older woman now, her hair gray, her face marked by time. But when I saw her, I immediately recognized something in her eyes. They were Juliana's eyes, the same eyes I had seen in the few photographs I had found. We hugged, two strangers united by a story of pain. And then we sat down, and I told her everything. I told her about her mother Juliana, how she had loved her more than life itself. I told her about the program that had snatched her away, about the desperate letters Juliana had written, about how the pain had finally consumed her. I showed her the documents, the photographs, the letters, everything I had kept all those years. Donna cried. She cried for the mother she had never known. She cried for the father who had abandoned her. She cried for all the lost years. But then she said something I will never forget. "My mother didn't abandon me," she said firmly through her tears. "She fought for me. She fought until her last breath. And even though I never knew her, even though I never heard her voice or felt her hug, now I know I was loved. I know that somewhere, at some point in my life, there was someone who loved me so much that she died from the pain of losing me." "Yes," I replied, tears streaming down my face too. "Your mother loved you more than words can express. And now, finally, you know the truth." We spent days together. I showed her our town, the places where Marcus had courted me, where everything had begun. We went to Boston, to the church where her parents had married, to the cemetery where Juliana was buried. Donna placed flowers on the grave of a mother she had never known and whispered words of forgiveness and love. "Thank you," she told me before returning to California. "Thank you for fighting. Thank you for not letting this story remain buried. All my life I felt something was missing. Now I finally know what. And even though it hurts, even though I wish I could have known my mother, at least now I have the peace of knowing the truth." When Donna left, I finally felt complete. The promise I had made to myself so many years ago, the promise to let Donna know the truth about her mother, had been kept. Juliana had not died in vain. Her story had been told, and her daughter, finally, knew she had been loved. Today, looking back on my long life, I know that there are women everywhere who are facing their own silent battles. Women who are discovering painful truths about people they trusted. Women who have to find the courage to stand up and fight against injustices that seem impossible to defeat. To them, I want to say, the truth can hurt. It can temporarily shatter you, but it is always better than a lie. And your voice, however small it may seem, has the power to change the world. I know there are still so many Donnas out there. So many children who were taken away and are now adults, searching for their origins, searching for answers. My work is not finished. As long as I have breath, I will continue to help these families reunite. I will continue to be the voice for those who can no longer speak, like Juliana. I will continue to honor the memory of a woman I only knew through documents and stories, but who forever changed the course of my life. Thank you for listening to me today, for allowing me to share with you this intimate chapter of my life. If my story has touched you, please don't hesitate to leave a like on this video and subscribe to this channel to discover other testimonies like mine. And please share it, because who knows? Maybe someone going through a similar trial right now will find the courage to keep searching, to hope, to believe in the impossible. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from today? Thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening to me.